The phone rang at 2:15 in the morning, cutting through the silence of my empty house like a scalpel. I'd been awake. 3 days without Lillian had transformed sleep into a distant memory. Rain drummed against the windows, a steady rhythm that had become the soundtrack to my spiral. "Mr. Carver? This is Detective Voss." My hand tightened around the phone. "Detectives don't call at 2 in the morning with good news." "We found the car, Mr. Carver." "In Lake Spanaway." The world tilted beneath me. I'd imagined this moment for 72 endless hours, playing out every possibility, but nothing prepared me for the hollow certainty in her voice. "I'll be right there," I managed to say, my voice a stranger's. Everyone thought they'd run away together. My wife and my best friend vanished on the same rainy Tuesday, leaving nothing but speculation and pitying glances. A modern-day scandal in our quiet Tacoma neighborhood. The whispers followed me like shadows. Poor Elias, the clueless husband, the abandoned friend. But I knew better. Lillian wouldn't leave without her mother's ring, still sitting in the ceramic dish by our bathroom sink. Nate wouldn't disappear without his lucky compass, the one that had guided him through 2 tours in Afghanistan. They wouldn't drain their accounts or leave digital breadcrumbs. They were smarter than that. The night they disappeared, Lillian had kissed me goodbye, her lips lingering a moment too long. "I'm just meeting Sarah for drinks," she'd said, smoothing her cream blouse with manicured fingers. But Sarah called the next morning, wondering why Lillian had canceled their plans. That same evening, Nate had texted me, "Rain check on poker night?" Something came up. Nate, who'd never missed our Thursday game in 15 years of friendship. I pulled on jeans and a sweater, my movements mechanical. The house we'd renovated together felt like a museum of a life that no longer existed. Lillian's scarves draped over the banister, her half-empty coffee mug on the counter, lipstick staining the rim in a perfect crescent. Nate's influence was everywhere too. The handcrafted kitchen island he'd built as a housewarming gift, the framed photo of us at Mount Rainier, arms slung around each other's shoulders, grinning like fools. The drive to Lake Spanaway took 23 minutes. Police lights pulsed against the darkness, reflecting off the water in hypnotic bursts of blue and red. Yellow tape cordoned off the shoreline, flapping in the wind like desperate flags. I parked behind a patrol car and stepped into the drizzle, my shoes sinking into mud. Detective Voss materialized from the darkness, her weathered face grim beneath a police cap. "Mr. Carver, I'm sorry you have to see this." "Where?" My voice cracked. She pointed toward the water's edge, where divers in black wetsuits emerged from the dark lake like seals. "About 30 feet out. Submerged in the mud. Fishermen spotted the roof reflection this morning." I moved toward the water, drawn by a gravity I couldn't resist. Voss placed a firm hand on my arm. "They're bringing it up now. Better to wait." But I couldn't wait. 3 days of uncertainty had hollowed me out. I needed to see to know. The car emerged slowly, water cascading from its frame as a winch hauled it from the lake's grip. Lillian's silver Audi, the one she'd insisted on buying last spring. The one she'd been so proud of. Now a waterlogged coffin, windows shattered, mud coating its once gleaming surface. "Any?" I couldn't finish the question. "No bodies," Voss answered, understanding my unspoken fear. "Not yet. The divers are still searching." Relief and dread battled within me. No bodies meant hope, however fragile. But it also meant more questions, more uncertainty. The most torturous kind of limbo. "The car was in neutral," Voss continued, professional detachment thinning over obvious suspicion. "No signs of impact damage. Almost like someone just let it roll in." I felt her studying my reaction, gauging my surprise. 3 days of being the primary suspect had taught me to guard my expressions. Were there any signs of struggle? Anything to indicate? "We'll know more after a thorough examination," she interrupted. "For now, I need you to look at something." She led me to a folding table where evidence bags were being catalogued. A junior officer handed her a small plastic bag, water droplets still clinging to its surface. "Recognize this?" Inside was Lillian's wedding ring, platinum with channel-set diamonds. The ring I'd placed on her finger 7 years ago, promising forever. A hairline crack ran through the band, like a prophecy I'd been too blind to read. "It's my wife's," I confirmed, my voice hollow. Voss nodded, making a note. "It was found on the floor of the passenger side. Not on her finger. Not where it should have been." Another piece of the puzzle that didn't fit the narrative of lovers escaping together. I looked back at the lake, black and impenetrable in the night. What else was it hiding beneath its surface? What truths were submerged in its depths, waiting to be dredged up? I need to know what happened to them, I said, rain mingling with what might have been tears on my face. Voss tucked the evidence bag away, her expression unreadable. So do I, Mr. Carver. So do I. As dawn broke over Lake Spanaway, I watched divers disappear beneath the water's surface again and again, searching for bodies that might never be found. I knew then that this was just the beginning, that the call that woke me in the dead of night had set something in motion that would consume me until I uncovered the truth. Lillian and Nate might have disappeared together, but I was certain of one thing: only one of them had chosen to vanish. I returned home as morning light struggled through Tacoma's perpetual cloud cover. Our Victorian, the forever home Lillian had fallen in love with 3 years ago, loomed before me, suddenly foreign. The white porch swing where we'd shared Sunday coffees creaked in the wind, a hollow conversation with no one. The lock clicked open and I stepped into silence. 4 days ago, this house had hummed with life, Lillian's playlist drifting from the kitchen, the scent of her jasmine perfume lingering in hallways. Now it felt like a museum of a life interrupted, preserved in amber but devoid of warmth. I hung my rain-soaked jacket beside Lillian's trench coat, still waiting patiently for her return. Water dripped onto the hardwood, forming a small puddle, evidence of my existence in a space that no longer recognized me. "Where did you go?" I whispered to the empty rooms. Methodically, I began searching for something, anything, I might have missed. The master bedroom remained untouched since Tuesday morning. Lillian's side of the bed neatly made, my side a tangle of sheets from restless nights. Her nightstand held a dog-eared novel, bookmark still nestled on page 143. Mine held sleeping pills I hadn't touched, afraid they'd dull my senses when I needed them sharpest. I opened her closet, sliding my hand across silks and wools. Nothing seemed missing beyond the cream blouse and charcoal skirt she'd worn Tuesday night. Her weekend bag remained on the top shelf. If she'd planned to leave, wouldn't she have packed? The bathroom yielded the same contradictions. Her expensive skincare products lined the vanity, including the serum she'd claimed she couldn't live without. Her mother's ring sat in the ceramic dish, exactly where she'd left it while washing her hands. I pressed my palms against the cool marble counter, staring at my reflection. Dark circles underscored bloodshot eyes. 3 days of stubble shadowed my jaw. I barely recognized myself. Was this the man Lillian had grown tired of? The friend Nate had betrayed? No. Something else had happened. I felt it in my bones. I moved to Lillian's home office, a sunny nook overlooking our backyard garden. Her real estate business had thrived over the past year. Carver Properties, building your future, proclaimed the elegant business cards in their silver holder. I smiled bitterly at the irony. Her desk was organized with characteristic precision, color-coded files, sticky notes aligned at perfect angles. I opened drawers, shuffled through papers, checked beneath the blotter. Nothing unusual. Her laptop was gone, with her at the supposed drinks with Sarah, no doubt. Behind her desk hung a corkboard of neighborhood listings, client thank-you notes, and personal photos. Nate featured in several: the 4 of us at Sarah's wedding last summer, Nate and me at the construction site of our first joint project, Lillian cutting the ribbon at Nate's new showroom. I stared at their smiling faces, searching for clues I'd missed. Had there been lingering glances? Hands brushing too casually? The photos revealed nothing but the friendship I'd believed in completely. As I turned away, something caught my eye. The edge of Lillian's desk drawer hadn't closed fully. I pulled it open again, feeling along the underside where a key was taped. She'd shown me this hiding spot years ago, laughing at her own paranoia. "Old habits from growing up with snooping sisters," she'd explained. The key opened her filing cabinet. Inside, behind tax returns and insurance policies, I found a phone I'd never seen before. Slim, black, not her usual rose gold iPhone. A burner. My heart hammered against my ribs as I powered it on. No password required. Just 5 contacts listed by initials. Dozens of text messages. I opened the most recent conversation with NH. Nate Holloway. "Everything's arranged. Tuesday, 8 o'clock. No turning back now." Lillian's response: "He doesn't suspect anything. It's better this way." My fingers gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles blanched. The betrayal burned, acid in my veins. So the rumors were true, they had planned this together. While I worked late on the Miller project, they plotted behind my back. I scrolled further, hungry for the pain now. "What about the lake house?" Nate had asked. "We can't risk it. Too obvious. The reservations are under the name we discussed." More messages detailed a meeting point, coded references to money. Then on Tuesday afternoon. "Cold feet?" From Nate. "Never. Just saying goodbye to everything. See you tonight. I set the phone down, rain drumming against the windows in perfect rhythm with my pulse. The storm had intensified, matching my darkening thoughts. Whatever they'd planned, the lake hadn't been part of it. The car in the water, the missing bodies, something had gone terribly wrong. As if hearing my thoughts, the burner phone buzzed in my hand. A new message from a number not in the contacts. It's done. I stared at those two words, their finality chilling. Who was writing? What was done? Outside, thunder cracked and the power flickered momentarily. In that brief darkness, I felt something shift inside me, grief hardening into resolve. Whoever had sent this message knew something about Lillian and Nate's fate, and I would find them whatever it took. I pocketed the phone and headed for the door. The empty house could keep its silence. I was done listening to it anyway. The Tacoma Police Department hummed with fluorescent efficiency. I sat in an interview room, the burner phone burning a hole in my pocket. Part of me wanted to slam it on the table, prove I wasn't the villain in this story. But instinct told me to wait. In this sterile box with its two-way mirror, I was guilty until proven innocent. Detective Rachel Voss entered, carrying a manila folder and 2 coffee cups. She slid one toward me, a peace offering I didn't trust. "Black 2 sugars," she said. "Officer Miller mentioned that's how you take it." I nodded, not touching the cup. "Any news from the divers?" "Nothing yet." She settled across from me, her caramel complexion washed out under harsh lighting. "Lake Spanaway's murky this time of year. Visibility's poor. But you didn't call me here to discuss water clarity." A hint of a smile touched her lips. "No, Mr. Carver. I didn't." She opened the folder, spreading photographs across the table. Lillian's car being winched from the lake. Close-ups of the interior, water damage evident on leather seats. The cracked wedding ring in its evidence bag. "Your wife's car shows no signs of an accident," she began, tapping a manicured nail on one image. "No impact damage. No skid marks on the shore. It appears to have been deliberately driven or pushed into the lake." "You think I did it?" "Not a question." Voss tilted her head, studying me. "You were home alone Tuesday night. No alibi. Phone records show your wife called you at 7:15 p.m., a conversation lasting 3 minutes. You claim she said she was meeting Sarah Kellerman for drinks, but Ms. Kellerman confirms your wife canceled their plans that afternoon. I told you this already. And I'm telling you again that your story has holes, Mr. Carver." She leaned forward. "Your wife and best friend disappear the same night. Your business partner of 5 years, correct? The man who helped you establish Carver and Holloway Architecture. 15 years, I corrected. We've been friends for 15 years. Business partners for 5. And in those 5 years were there ever tensions? Disagreements over business matters?" I laughed bitterly. "You think I murdered my wife and best friend over a business dispute? I'm exploring all possibilities." Her tone remained neutral, professional. "Including the possibility that you discovered their affair and reacted impulsively." The word affair struck like a physical blow, despite the evidence I'd found. Hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way the text messages hadn't. "There was no affair," I lied, unsure why I was protecting them. Voss shuffled her photos, revealing a bank statement. "Your wife withdrew $15,000 over the past 3 months. Small amounts, nothing that would trigger alerts. And Mr. Holloway cleared out his savings account on Monday, $43,000. My mind raced. The texts mentioned money reservations. They've been planning this for months. "Meanwhile," she continued, "your finances remain untouched. And you've been working late nights on the Miller project. Alone in your office according to your secretary. Convenient." Anger flared hot and sudden. "I didn't kill them." "Then help me understand what happened. Because right now, you're my prime suspect in a potential double homicide." I gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. The Miller project had consumed me for weeks. Design revisions, permit issues, budget constraints. While I'd been drowning in blueprints, had Lillian and Nate been plotting their escape? Or something worse? A memory surfaced, Nate at our last site meeting, unusually agitated. "You always get the credit, don't you, Eli? The Miller project is my design too, you know." I'd brushed it off as stress. Now I wondered if resentment had been building beneath our friendship for years. Nate was unhappy, I admitted. The Miller project, he felt sidelined. The client preferred my designs, requested me specifically for meetings. Voss made notes. "And how did that affect your friendship?" "It didn't. Or I didn't think it did." "When did you last see Mr. Holloway?" "Monday afternoon at the office. He left early, Said he wasn't feeling well. The day before he emptied his bank account. I nodded, pieces clicking into place. Monday's illness had been his preparation. Tuesday they vanished. But the car in the lake, that didn't align with escape plans. Unless one of them had changed the script. Detective, I said carefully. Have you considered that one of them might have betrayed the other? Her expression remained impassive. I'm considering all scenarios, Mr. Carver. Including one where you discovered their plans and decided to punish them both. I didn't know anything until I stopped myself, the burner phone suddenly heavy in my pocket. Until you found what? Her eyes narrowed. Until I found their text messages this morning, I hedged. On her regular phone. Another lie. I wasn't ready to surrender my only lead. Voss's phone buzzed. She checked it, her posture shifting subtly. We're done for now. She gathered her photos with practiced efficiency. Don't leave town, Mr. Carver. What is it? I asked, recognizing something in her expression. Did they find something? She paused at the door. A witness came forward. Someone saw two people near the lake Tuesday night. Neither of them was you. Relief and confusion battled within me. So I'm not a suspect anymore? Her smile held no warmth. I didn't say that. Two people at the lake doesn't mean a third wasn't involved. After all, someone had to drive the second car. The door closed behind her with a definitive click. I sat alone, the untouched coffee cooling between my hands. Two people at the lake. Lillian and Nate, alive at least Tuesday night. But then what happened? And who had texted "It's done" on the burner phone? I left the station with more questions than answers, and a growing certainty that whatever game Lillian and Nate had been playing, someone else had joined. Someone who had changed the rules entirely. Rain had transformed into a fine mist by the time I arrived at my mother-in-law's colonial-style home in North Tacoma. Margaret Carver's perfectly manicured front lawn and precise hedgerows matched her personality, controlled, immaculate, unforgiving of imperfection. Like mother, like daughter, though Lillian had hidden her edges better. I hadn't called ahead. Margaret wasn't the type to reveal anything over the phone, especially to me, the man she'd never deemed worthy of her only child. She answered on the third knock, her tall frame blocking the doorway, silver hair pulled into a severe bun that stretched the skin at her temples. 5 days since her daughter's disappearance, and not a wrinkle in her charcoal pantsuit betrayed any distress. Elias. My name on her lips sounded like an accusation. I was wondering when you'd come. May I come in? I asked, though we both knew it wasn't really a question. She stepped aside with practiced grace, leading me into a living room that resembled a furniture showroom rather than a lived-in space. No photographs of Lillian adorned the walls. Margaret had never been sentimental. Tea, she offered, already pouring from a silver pot that waited on the coffee table. She'd known I was coming. They found her car, I said, ignoring the offer. In Lake Spanaway. Margaret's hand paused mid-pour, a momentary crack in her composure. Yes, Detective Voss informed me this morning. Did she also inform you I'm their prime suspect? The corner of her mouth twitched, almost a smile. Are you surprised? Husbands are always the first suspects when wives go missing. And what about when they go missing with their husband's best friend? I countered. She set the teapot down with deliberate care. I never approved of Nathaniel. He lacked substance. But you think they were having an affair? Margaret finally looked directly at me, her gray eyes, so like Lillian's, assessing. Weren't they? The question hung between us. I chose my next words carefully. I think they were planning something. Together. Did Lillian mention anything to you? Anything unusual in the weeks before she disappeared? My daughter and I speak daily. She used the present tense, I noted. She mentioned no plans. A lot. I could feel it. Margaret Carver had never approved of me, the scholarship boy who'd stolen her daughter from the future she'd mapped out. Marriage to Frederick Whitmore, third-generation wealth and connections that would have elevated Lillian in Tacoma's social hierarchy. Instead, Lillian had chosen an ambitious architect with talent but no pedigree. Margaret, please. If you know anything. What I know, she interrupted, voice suddenly hard, is that you were always too absorbed in your work to notice my daughter's unhappiness. The accusation stung because it carried a grain of truth. The Miller Project had consumed me. Had I missed signs of Lillian's discontent? Had I driven her into Nate's arms? She never said anything, I murmured. Lillian was raised to handle her problems privately, Margaret replied, smoothing an invisible wrinkle from her slacks. A quality you might have appreciated had you paid attention. I bit back a retort. Fighting with Margaret wouldn't get me answers. I changed tactics. Did Lillian leave anything here? Anything she asked you to keep for her? Her expression remained impassive, but something flickered in her eyes. No. Another lie. Margaret, I'm not the police. I just want to understand what happened. If they were running away together, fine. But something went wrong. The car in the lake, no bodies found. I leaned forward. I think they might be in danger. Or worse. For a moment her mask slipped. Concern, real concern, shadowed her features before she composed herself again. I've told you what I know, Elias. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a charity board meeting in an hour. She stood, our conversation clearly over. As she escorted me to the door, a memory surfaced. Lillian and Margaret in heated whispers at our Christmas party last December, falling silent when I approached. Lillian's eyes had been bright with unshed tears, Margaret's hand gripping her daughter's arm too tightly. At the threshold I paused. One more thing. Did Lillian ever mention a lake house? Margaret's perfectly controlled expression didn't change, but her hand tightened on the doorknob. No. Goodbye, Elias. The door closed firmly behind me. I stood on the porch, processing the interaction. Margaret knew more than she was saying, but what? And why hide it? As I walked to my car, movement caught my eye across the street. Howard Jenkins, Margaret's neighbor for 20 years, was retrieving his mail. He waved, crossing toward me. Elias, any word about Lillian? Genuine concern creased his weathered face. Terrible business, just terrible. Nothing certain yet, I replied, suddenly struck by an idea. Mr. Jenkins, you're usually home most days, aren't you? Retired life and all? He nodded, pride in his routine evident. Like clockwork. Morning paper, afternoon gardening, evening news with Maureen. Did you happen to notice any visitors at Margaret's house recently? Particularly anyone driving a black pickup truck? Jenkins didn't hesitate. Oh, that contractor fellow, your friend. He was here last Thursday. Parked right where you are now. My pulse quickened. Nate? You're sure? Positive. Distinctive truck, that big one with the company logo. Stayed about an hour. He lowered his voice conspiratorially. Seemed like a heated discussion. Margaret doesn't usually entertain men, you know? 5 days before they disappeared, Nate had visited Margaret, without Lillian, without telling me. Another piece of the puzzle, but its place remained unclear. I thanked Jenkins and slid into my car, mind racing. As I reached for my keys, my fingers brushed something in my jacket pocket. The coat Lillian had bought me last birthday, the one I'd grabbed from the hall closet this morning. I pulled out a small brass key I'd never seen before, attached to a plain ring. No markings, no label. Just another secret waiting to be unlocked. The mysterious key weighed in my palm like a confession. Brass, approximately 2 inches long with a distinctive notched pattern. Not a house key, not a car key. Something more specific. I traced its outline with my thumb, wondering what Lillian had hidden that required this level of secrecy. I drove aimlessly through Tacoma's rain-slicked streets, the afternoon light fading into premature dusk beneath heavy clouds. The city felt like a maze of memories, the waterfront park where Lillian and I had shared our first kiss, the construction site of the Miller project where Nate and I had argued last month, the restaurant where the four of us, Lillian, Nate, Sarah, and I, had celebrated New Year's Eve just 10 weeks ago. Had they been planning this even then? Had Nate raised his glass to new beginnings, while already plotting to steal my wife? I shook my head, forcing myself to focus. The key. What did it open? Our joint checking account was at Pacific Northwest Bank downtown. Perhaps a safe deposit box? It seemed unlikely we shared all financial matters. At least I thought we had. I parked in the bank's underground garage just as they were preparing to close. The assistant manager, a young woman named Tina who knew me by name, looked surprised to see me. Mr. Carver. I'm so sorry about Mrs. Carver. It's all over the news. Of course it was. Missing wife, missing best friend. The local media would be feasting on the scandal. Thank you, Tina. I actually have a question about safe deposit boxes. Would Lillian have been able to open one without my knowledge? Tina's professional smile faltered. Well, Mrs. Carver has her own accounts separate from your joint accounts. Client confidentiality prevents me from... I understand, I interrupted. But this key doesn't look like a safe deposit key anyway. I showed it to her. Tina shook her head. No, definitely not one of ours. That looks more like a storage locker key. A storage locker. Of course. I thanked her and headed back to my car, a new destination in mind. 3 months ago, Lillian had mentioned clearing out her office supplies from our garage, taking them to a storage facility because the clutter was driving her crazy. I'd thought nothing of it at the time. Tacoma Self-Storage occupied a drab concrete building near the port. By the time I arrived, the office was closed, but the facility boasted 24-hour access with a keycard. I walked the perimeter, noting the security cameras and electronic gates. I couldn't get in without a keycard, but I could at least confirm if Lillian had a unit here. I dialed the after-hours number listed on the gate. Tacoma Self-Storage, a bored voice answered. Hello, this is Elias Carver. My wife, Lillian Carver, has a unit at your facility, but I've misplaced the paperwork with the unit number. Could you verify it for me? A long pause. Sir, we can only release that information to the name on the contract. I understand, but my wife is... I swallowed hard. She's missing. The police are investigating. I'm trying to find any information that might help. Another pause. I'll need to see some ID and a police report before I can help you. Office opens at 9 tomorrow. 9 tomorrow felt like a lifetime away. I thanked him and hung up, frustration mounting. Every lead seemed to end in a locked door. The burner phone in my pocket buzzed. A new message from the same unknown number. Check the news. My heart raced as I opened the local news site on my phone. The headline hit me like a physical blow. Body found in Lake Spanaway, identification pending. I leaned against my car, suddenly lightheaded. One body. Not two. Oh. I scrolled through the sparse details. A male body discovered by divers approximately 50 yards from where the car had been submerged. No identity confirmed. Nate. It had to be Nate. Which meant Lillian might still be alive. Unless the lake hadn't given up all its secrets yet. I called Detective Voss, but the call went straight to voicemail. I was on my own, at least for now. I returned to my car, mind racing. If Lillian was alive, where would she go? What was she running from, or who? The key. I still needed to find what had opened. On impulse, I drove to Nate's apartment building in downtown Tacoma. We'd helped him move in last year after his divorce. A sleek one-bedroom with views of Commencement Bay. I still had a spare key for emergencies. This certainly qualified. Nate's apartment was immaculate, almost untouched. No dishes in the sink, bed perfectly made. It looked staged like a model home. Not like someone had left in a hurry. I searched methodically, closets, drawers, under the bed. Nothing unusual. No clues about their plans. No storage unit paperwork. In his home office, I found a framed photo of the four of us from Sarah's wedding. Something about it caught my eye. Nate's hand resting casually on Lillian's lower back while my attention was turned elsewhere. Had I been blind to what was happening right in front of me? Behind the photo frame, taped to the wall, was a small brass key identical to the one in my pocket. My hands trembled as I held them side by side. 2 keys. Same lock. On Nate's desk, a notepad held the impression of something written on a torn-away page. I ran a pencil lightly over it, revealing the ghostly words, Evergreen Storage, Unit 23. Not Tacoma Self-Storage. Evergreen, a smaller facility on the outskirts of town. As I left Nate's apartment, the burner phone buzzed again. She's waiting for you. Who was sending these messages? And what would I find in Storage Unit 23? Only one way to find out. Evergreen Storage stood on a desolate stretch of Industrial Parkway, illuminated by sickly yellow security lights that barely penetrated the deepening twilight. A chain-link fence topped with razor wire surrounded rows of identical metal units. No attendant, just a keypad gate and security cameras monitoring silent corridors. The brass key fit smoothly into Unit 23's padlock. I hesitated before turning it, unsure what waited behind the metal door. A body? Evidence of an affair? Or something entirely unexpected? I lifted the door with a metallic groan that echoed through the empty facility. The overhead light activated automatically, revealing not a haphazard collection of office supplies, but a meticulously organized command center. A folding table held a laptop, printer, and stacks of documents. File boxes lined one wall, each labeled with cryptic acronyms. A corkboard displayed maps of the Pacific Northwest, with red pins marking locations I didn't recognize. A sleeping bag was rolled neatly in one corner, alongside a duffel bag and camping supplies. This wasn't a storage unit. It was a hideout. A war room. But for what? I approached the laptop, finding it unlocked, deliberately left accessible. The screen showed a spreadsheet of property listings, names, and dollar amounts. Carver Properties listings. Lillian's clients. I scrolled through the document, recognition dawning. These were Lillian's sales from the past year, the same deals that had catapulted her to Realtor of the Year. But beside each legitimate sale price was a second, higher figure, with the difference calculated in a column labeled margin. The properties weren't just homes. They were waterfront warehouses, commercial lots, industrial parcels. Properties with flexible zoning and minimal oversight. I opened another file, blueprints for renovations submitted to the city planning department. I recognized Nate's distinctive style. My stomach twisted as I realized what I was looking at. Money laundering. Lillian selling properties at inflated prices, with Nate submitting renovation plans that would never be completed. The perfect scheme. One partner finding the properties, another providing legitimate documentation for improvements that justified the price inflation. But who was behind it? Who had the money to launder, and what had they done to Lillian and Nate? I rifled through the file boxes, finding offshore account numbers, passport photos, and a half-completed visa application for Lillian. She'd been planning to run, but not with Nate. A leather portfolio contained contracts with a name that made my blood freeze. Victor Kazarian. A developer with rumored ties to organized crime, whose projects our firm had refused to bid on last year. Nate had wanted that contract. We'd argued about it, my ethical concerns against his ambition. Some opportunities only come once, Eli, he'd said. I thought he'd dropped it when I stood firm. Clearly he hadn't. He'd gone behind my back, bringing Lillian into his scheme. But why the elaborate disappearance? Why the car in the lake? I found a notebook in Lillian's handwriting, detailing meeting times, property addresses, and cash drops. The final entry dated last Tuesday, final payment. Exit strategy initiated. They'd planned to take the money and run. But something had gone terribly wrong. The burner phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. Look under the tarp. I hadn't noticed the blue tarp in the far corner, covering what appeared to be a large box. I pulled it away to reveal a metal lockbox. The second brass key, the one I'd found in Nate's apartment, fit perfectly. Inside lay bundles of cash, a passport for Lillian under a different name, and a thumb drive. Beneath it all, a manila envelope containing photographs, surveillance shots of Lillian meeting with a man I recognized from news reports as Victor Kazarian's enforcer. More damning, photos of Nate and Lillian embracing in a hotel room, their affair documented in excruciating detail. The timestamps showed they dated back over a year, long before any property schemes began. The betrayal was complete, years in the making, while I remained oblivious, buried in my work and trusting blindly. At the bottom of the envelope, one final photograph. Lillian and Victor Kazarian on his yacht, her smile intimate and calculating. Not a hostage but a willing partner. The thumb drive contained video files. With trembling hands, I connected it to the laptop and opened the first one. Nate's face filled the screen, his expression grim. Eli, if you're watching this, things didn't go as planned. Lillian and I. He looked away, composing himself. It started as an affair. I won't apologize for that. But it became something else. Victor Kazarian approached us last year with an opportunity. It was supposed to be simple: help move some money, take our cut, walk away. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd seen 1,000 times across conference tables and bar tops. But you don't just walk away from someone like Kazarian. He owns us now. These recordings are insurance. If anything happens to me, the evidence goes public. Nate leaned closer to the camera. Eli, Lillian's in deeper than she knows. Kazarian isn't just using her business, he wants her. She thinks she's playing him, but... The video cut off abruptly. I clicked the next file, but a message appeared: password required. I tried combinations of Lillian's birth date, our anniversary, her mother's maiden name. Nothing worked. Outside, tires crunched on gravel. Headlights swept across the storage unit door. I quickly pocketed the thumb drive and cash, leaving the rest. A car door slammed. Footsteps approached. Someone knew I was here. Someone who had been watching all along. I ducked behind the file boxes, dimming the laptop screen with one hand while searching for anything that might serve as a weapon. The footsteps stopped just outside. A shadow fell across the unit's entrance. Elias. Sarah Kellerman's voice sent a jolt through me. Lillian's best friend, the one she'd supposedly been meeting for drinks the night she disappeared. I emerged cautiously. Sarah? How did you find me? She stood framed in the doorway, raindrops glistening on her dark hair. Her normally composed face was drawn with exhaustion, eyes darting nervously behind her. We don't have much time, she said, stepping inside and lowering the storage unit door partway. I've been following you since you left Nate's apartment. You've been tracking me? Why? She ignored the question, surveying the room with practiced efficiency. You found it? Good. Did you see the videos? Some of them. How do you know about? Because I helped set this up. She moved to the laptop, typing in a password that instantly unlocked the protected files. Nate was worried something might happen. He made contingencies. My mind raced. Sarah, the police found a body in the lake. They think it's Nate. Her shoulders stiffened, but she didn't turn. I know. It's been confirmed. His parents were notified this afternoon. The clinical detachment in her voice chilled me. Nate had been her friend too, for years before I even met Lillian. Yet she spoke of his death with strange distance. You don't seem surprised, I observed. I'm not. She opened a folder containing dozens of video files. After Tuesday night, I suspected the worst. What happened Tuesday night? Sarah, what aren't you telling me? She finally faced me, conflict evident in her expression. Lillian called me that afternoon, frantic. Said things had gone wrong, that Nate was backing out and threatening to expose everything. She was terrified that Kazarian would find out. So there was no drink plan with you? No. She used me as her alibi, knowing I'd cover for her. I always did. A hint of bitterness colored her voice. Lillian has a way of making you feel special when she needs something from you. I knew that talent of Lillian's all too well. Where is she, Sarah? I don't know. But I can tell you she's alive. She pulled out her phone, showing me a security camera still frame dated yesterday. Lillian entering a convenience store in Portland, Oregon, hair dyed dark brown, wearing glasses but unmistakably her. My heart constricted. She just left me to be blamed for everything. For Nate's death. Nate wasn't supposed to die. Sarah's voice cracked slightly. The plan was for both of them to disappear, make it look like they'd run off together. The car in the lake was meant to be found weeks later, by which time they'd be in South America with new identities. Then what went wrong? Kazarian discovered what they were planning. The properties, the money, they'd stolen over $2 million from him. She scrolled through the laptop, bringing up surveillance photos of a dark-haired man with cold eyes. This is Anton Riker, Kazarian's enforcer. He was at the lake that night. The witness Detective Voss had mentioned. 2 people at the lake, not Lillian and Nate but Nate and this enforcer. Did he kill Nate? I asked, rage and grief tangling inside me. I think Lillian did. The world tilted sideways. That's impossible. She wouldn't. The autopsy report. She opened another file. How had she accessed this? Nate died from a single gunshot wound to the chest, fired at close range. The gun was recovered from the lake bed. It's registered to Lillian. I sank onto the folding chair, the evidence crushing me beneath its weight. My wife hadn't just betrayed me with my best friend, she'd murdered him when he became a liability. Why are you helping me? I finally asked. Why show me all this? Sarah's expression hardened. Because Lillian is still out there and she'll destroy anyone who threatens her freedom. Including you. She pressed a flash drive into my hand. This contains everything. The money laundering scheme, Kazarian's involvement, evidence of Nate's murder. Take it to Detective Voss. If you have all this, why haven't you gone to the police yourself? She looked away. I'm implicated too. I helped them set up the offshore accounts. Understanding dawned. You weren't just covering for Lillian. You were part of this. Not the murder, she said quickly. I never wanted anyone to get hurt. It was supposed to be victimless, just moving money around. The pieces clicked into place. Sarah with her accounting background. Lillian with her real estate connections. Nate providing architectural legitimacy. A perfect team for laundering millions. Here. She handed me a slip of paper. An address in Portland. It's a safe house Lillian and I set up last year. If she's still in the city, that's where she'll be. I pocketed it, my suspicion growing. Why tell me this now? Why not go to the police? Because she'll see me coming. But you? Sarah's smile held no warmth. You're the last person she expects. Before I could respond, her phone chimed. She checked it, her face paling. We need to go. Now. Kazarian's men are watching this facility. As if confirming her words, headlights swept across the partially open door, accompanied by the low rumble of an approaching vehicle. Is there another way out? I whispered. She pointed to a maintenance access panel in the back wall. That leads to the next row. My car's parked behind the building. As we slipped through the narrow opening, the burner phone buzzed once more. She'll pay. The same words found in Nate's wallet. I turned to confront Sarah, but she was already crawling ahead, leading me into the darkness beyond. The drive to Portland stretched before me like a descent into darkness. Rain pelted the windshield relentlessly, highway lights smearing into watery streaks as I pushed my car beyond reasonable speeds. Sarah followed in her own vehicle, headlights steady in my rearview mirror. A guardian or a handler, I wasn't entirely sure. We'd separated at the storage facility after a narrow escape through the back fence, Kazarian's men missing us by moments. The flash drive Sarah had given me burned a hole in my pocket, its contents potentially explosive enough to bring down Kazarian's operation and implicate Lillian in Nate's murder. If I could trust anything Sarah told me. Interstate 5 stretched through the night, each mile drawing me closer to Portland, and to Lillian. My wife. My betrayer. Possibly a murderer. The burner phone buzzed again. Not the anonymous texter this time but Sarah. Stop at the next rest area. We need to talk before Portland. 20 minutes later, I pulled into a deserted rest stop, rain hammering the roof as I waited for Sarah to park beside me. She slipped into my passenger seat, bringing the scent of expensive perfume and rain-soaked wool. You need to be prepared for who she's become, Sarah said without preamble, her profile sharp in the dim light. The Lillian you knew died long before Nate did. How long has she been involved with Kazarian? Sarah's laugh was hollow. You really were blind, weren't you? 3 years, Elias. Since that charity gala where she sold his first property. 3 years. Before Nate's involvement. Before the money laundering. Our marriage had been a lie even longer than I'd imagined. And you? I kept my voice level, though rage simmered beneath. How long have you been helping them? I came in later. After things escalated with Kazarian. She stared through the rain-streaked windshield. Lillian presented it as a business opportunity. By the time I realized how deep we were, it was too late to back out. And Nate? Was he just another pawn in her game? Something flickered across Sarah's face, pain, perhaps, or guilt. Nate loved her. Genuinely loved her. He thought they were building a future together. Until she put a bullet in his chest. Sarah winced. When Kazarian discovered they were planning to take his money and run, Nate wanted to turn themselves in, cut a deal. Lillian disagreed. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the car like impatient fingers. I thought of Nate, my best friend since college, the best man at my wedding, dying alone in the dark at Lake Spanaway, betrayed by the woman he'd betrayed me for. I spoke to Margaret today, I said, watching Sarah carefully. She knows more than she's saying. Sarah's expression tightened. Margaret's always known what Lillian was. She helped create her. What do you mean? Where do you think Lillian learned to manipulate people? Margaret's been running her own schemes for decades. Sarah pulled out her phone, showing me photos of Margaret meeting with Victor Kazarian 2 years ago. She introduced them. Her own daughter, offered up to a criminal because it served her interests. The revelation hit like a physical blow. Not just Lillian and Nate, but Margaret too, all of them conspiring, using me as an unwitting front for their operations. The respected architect husband providing legitimacy while they moved dirty money behind the scenes. Why tell me all this? I asked, suspicion hardening. What do you get out of exposing Lillian? Sarah met my gaze directly. Protection. When you turn that flash drive over to the police, I want immunity. I'll testify against Kazarian and Lillian in exchange. Self-preservation. Of course. Sarah wasn't helping me out of loyalty or remorse, she was saving herself. And Margaret? I don't care what happens to Margaret, she said coldly. Just make sure my name stays clean. I nodded, not committing to anything. The safe house address, you're sure she'll be there? It's under a name no one knows. Paid in cash through a shell company. If she's hiding in Portland, that's where she'll be. Sarah checked her watch. We should go. It's nearly midnight. As she opened the door to return to her car, I caught her arm. One more thing. The text messages I've been receiving. Are they from you? Her eyebrows rose in what seemed like genuine confusion. What messages? I showed her the burner phone with its cryptic texts. Check the news. She's waiting for you. She'll pay. Sarah's face paled. I didn't send these. But I know who might have. She took a shaky breath. Nate had a brother, Ryan. Military Special Forces. They weren't close, but blood is blood. If he found out what happened. Another player I hadn't considered. How many more surprises waited in this tangled web? We reached Portland at 1:30 in the morning, the city a glistening maze of wet streets and neon reflections. The safe house address led to a nondescript apartment building in the Pearl District, its modern facade hiding whatever secrets lurked within. Sarah parked a block away. Apartment 403, she said, handing me a key card. I'll wait here. If you're not back in 30 minutes, I'm calling the police. And if she's there? Sarah's expression was grim. Don't underestimate her, Elias. She's not the woman you married anymore. I approached the building alone, rain soaking through my jacket. The key card granted me silent access to the lobby. As I stepped into the elevator, my phone buzzed with a call from Detective Voss. Carver, I answered quietly. Where are you? Her voice was tight with urgency. Portland. Following a lead on Lillian. Get out of there. Now. Steele underlined each word. Margaret Carver was found dead an hour ago. Gunshot wound, execution style. The elevator doors opened to the 4th floor. Who? Ballistics matched the weapon that killed Nathaniel Holloway. The phone nearly slipped from my suddenly numb fingers. Lillian killed her own mother? Return to Tacoma immediately, Voss ordered. This just became a manhunt. As I hung up, the apartment door at the end of the hall opened. A slice of light cut across the darkened corridor. And there she was. My wife. Alive. Lillian stood in the doorway, a ghost made flesh. Her normally blonde hair was now dark brown, cut in a severe bob that accentuated the sharp angles of her face. Designer clothes replaced by nondescript jeans and a black sweater. Only her eyes remained unchanged, calculating gray just like her mother's. Elias. My name on her lips sounded like a question. How did you find me? I stepped forward, heart hammering against my ribs. Does it matter? She retreated into the apartment, leaving the door open. Invitation or escape route, I couldn't tell. I followed her inside, hyper-aware of my surroundings. The apartment was sparsely furnished, impersonal. A temporary shelter, not a home. You shouldn't have come, she said, moving to the kitchenette where an open laptop displayed flight schedules. It's not safe for you to be here. Not safe. A bitter laugh escaped me. Nate is dead. Your mother is dead. And the police think you killed them both. She froze, her back to me. Margaret is dead? The genuine shock in her voice gave me pause. An hour ago. Same gun that killed Nate. Her shoulders slumped just slightly before she squared them again. When she turned, her face was a composed mask. And you believe I pulled the trigger? I don't know what to believe anymore. I gestured around the sterile apartment. The wife I thought I knew wouldn't be hiding in Portland with dyed hair and fake IDs after her lover's body was found in a lake. Is that what you think happened? That Nate and I were running away together? A strange smile curved her lips. You always did see what you expected to see, Eli. Then tell me what I'm missing. I took the flash drive from my pocket, holding it up. Because the evidence paints a pretty damning picture. Money laundering. Offshore accounts. Your gun at the scene of Nate's murder. Her eyes fixed on the flash drive. Where did you get that? Sarah. Something dangerous flickered across Lillian's face. Sarah gave you that? And led you here? She laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. Of course she did. She told me everything, Lillian. About Kazarian, the properties, your plans to steal his money and disappear. Did she tell you her role? Lillian moved toward the living room window, checking the street below. Did she mention that this was her idea from the beginning? I followed her gaze to the street, where Sarah's car was parked exactly where she'd said she would wait. She admitted to helping with the accounts. Helping? Lillian scoffed. Sarah doesn't help with anything. She orchestrates. She manipulates. And you walked right into her trap, bringing exactly what she needs to tie up her loose ends. My fingers tightened around the flash drive. What are you saying? I'm saying Sarah worked for Kazarian long before any of us. She's his financial architect. Lillian moved to a closet, pulling out a small suitcase. She introduced me to him at that charity gala, knowing my real estate connections would be useful. She brought Nate in later when we needed architectural plans to justify the renovations. And you just went along with it? Anger rose in my throat. Became a criminal, cheated on me all because Sarah suggested it? I never cheated on you with Nate. Her voice was even, emotionless. That was part of the cover story Sarah created. The cheating wife and best friend who run away together. The perfect distraction while she took the money and disappeared. I struggled to process her words. The photos in the storage unit, you and Nate. Staged. For insurance. Sarah has similar photos of herself with Kazarian's men. She zipped the suitcase with mechanical efficiency. Everything was compartmentalized. I handled properties. Nate provided plans. Sarah moved the money. But when Kazarian became suspicious, she needed a fall guy. Or in this case, fall guys. Nate found out, I said slowly, pieces clicking into place. That's why he was killed. Lillian nodded, a flash of genuine pain crossing her features. He discovered Sarah had been skimming millions more than we knew about. When he confronted her, she arranged a meeting at Lake Spanaway. Her voice faltered. I was supposed to be there too. But you weren't. No. I got delayed, deliberately, I now realize. By the time I arrived, Nate was. She swallowed hard. My gun was missing from the glove compartment. Sarah had borrowed my car that morning. It sounded implausible, convenient, yet something in her steadfast gaze made me hesitate. And your mother? Why would Sarah kill Margaret? Because Margaret knew too much. Lillian checked her watch. Sarah's not waiting for you, Eli. She's making sure I don't leave this apartment alive. The moment you showed her those text messages, she knew someone else was onto her. Probably Ryan Holloway. She needs to clean up every loose end before he finds her. My phone buzzed. Detective Voss again. I answered on speaker. Carver, where are you? Forensics found fingerprints at Margaret Carver's house. They match Sarah Kellerman. Lillian's eyes locked with mine, vindication flashing across her face. She's with me, I told Voss. Outside the building where I found Lillian. Stay put. Portland PD is en route. As I hung up, movement in the street below caught my eye. Sarah was exiting her car, phone to her ear. Even from 4 stories up, I could see the gun in her other hand. We need to go, I said. Now. Lillian grabbed her suitcase. There's a service elevator. Back stairwell leads to the parking garage. As we headed for the door, the burner phone buzzed one final time. Got her. Coming for you. Ryan. What does that mean? Lillian asked. I showed her the earlier messages. I think Nate's brother has been tracking all of us. And he just found Sarah. Lillian's expression hardened. Good. In the hallway the elevator dinged. We froze as the doors slid open, revealing not Sarah, but a tall man with Nate's jawline and cold, military eyes. Ryan Holloway had arrived. Ryan Holloway stepped from the elevator, his movements precise and controlled. Military training evident in his posture, threat assessment in his eyes. Nate's features refracted through a harder lens, same jawline, different purpose. Elias Carver, he said, voice low and steady. Took you long enough. Behind me, Lillian tensed. Ryan. You're the one who's been sending messages to Elias. He nodded once, gaze shifting between us. Had to make sure he found the evidence. Figured a husband would be motivated to follow the breadcrumbs. Where's Sarah? I asked, acutely aware that we were trapped in a hallway with limited exits. Temporarily incapacitated in her vehicle. Ryan's expression remained impassive. She won't be joining us. Relief and alarm battled within me. Did you? She's alive. For now. He looked at Lillian. Unlike my brother. Lillian's face paled. Ryan, I didn't kill Nate. You have to believe me. I know. His response surprised us both. Surveillance footage from the lake that night. Sarah's car arriving. Sarah approaching Nate. Sarah leaving alone. Each statement landed like a bullet. Took some doing to access it, but I have resources. You have footage of Sarah killing Nate? I asked, hope and horror tangling in my chest. Not the act itself, but enough to establish timeline and presence. Ryan's hand moved to his jacket pocket, withdrawing a small flash drive. This, combined with what you found at the storage unit, should be enough for the authorities. From the stairwell behind him came the sound of a door opening. Ryan's body language shifted instantly, alert, predatory. We need to move, he said. Sarah's not working alone. Kazarian's men are in the building. He gestured toward the service elevator Lillian had mentioned. Now. The 3 of us moved quickly down the corridor, an unlikely alliance born of survival. As the service elevator doors closed, a gunshot echoed down the hallway, bullet embedding in the closing doors. They're not trying to take prisoners, Ryan observed calmly. So much for Sarah being incapacitated, I muttered. Different shooter. Taller, heavier build. Ryan checked his watch. Portland PD response time to this neighborhood. Approximately 8 minutes. We've been in this building for 6. The elevator opened to the underground parking garage, dim and cavernous. Ryan led us to a black SUV with tinted windows. Get in, he ordered. Lillian hesitated. How do I know I can trust you? Ryan's eyes hardened. You don't. But your alternatives are dwindling rapidly. She slid into the back seat, clutching her suitcase. I took the passenger seat beside Ryan, who drove with the same precision that characterized his every movement. As we emerged from the garage, a police cruiser screamed past us, lights flashing. Ryan didn't flinch, maintaining a steady, inconspicuous speed. How long have you been tracking us? I asked. since they found the car in the lake. Ryan navigated Portland's empty streets with practiced ease. Nate called me 3 days before he died. Said he was in trouble, needed extraction. Military term, not something he'd use casually. I was en route when he was killed. Lillian leaned forward. Nate knew Sarah was setting us up? He suspected someone was. Didn't know who. Ryan's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. I was too late. And Margaret? I asked. Did Sarah kill her too? Execution style. Professional. Same weapon that killed Nate. Ryan's voice remained emotionless, clinical. Margaret was helping Lillian disappear. Sarah couldn't allow that. I turned to Lillian. You went to your mother for help? She nodded, guilt shadowing her features. After Nate died, I needed someone I could trust. Margaret had connections. People who could make me disappear. For a price, Ryan added. Margaret Carver didn't do anything out of maternal love. Lillian didn't contradict him. She helped arrange this safe house, new identification. Said she'd handle Sarah. Instead, Sarah handled her, I said grimly. We drove in silence for several minutes, the city lights blurring past. Finally, Ryan spoke again. The evidence on those drives is enough to bring down Kazarian's operation and implicate Sarah in both murders. He glanced at Lillian. And clear your name partially. You're still guilty of money laundering and fraud. I know. Lillian's voice was small, resigned. I'll cooperate fully. Testify against Kazarian and Sarah. Ryan nodded, as if this confirmed something he'd already decided. There's a safe house in Seattle. FBI contact who owes me a favor. He'll arrange protective custody until the trial. Why are you helping us? I asked. After what happened to Nate. I'm not helping you, Ryan interrupted coldly. I'm ensuring my brother's killers face justice. All of them. His gaze flicked to Lillian in the rearview mirror. You didn't pull the trigger, but you brought him into this mess. Remember that. As we crossed the Morrison Bridge, leaving Portland behind, Lillian reached into her pocket and withdrew something small and gleaming, her wedding ring. The platinum band cracked just as it had been when they'd pulled it from the lake. I never wanted to hurt you, Eli, she said softly. That part wasn't an act. The ring fell from her fingers, landing on the seat between us. In the dim light of passing street lamps, I could see an inscription I'd forgotten. Truth above all. A promise we'd made and broken in countless ways. Ryan's phone buzzed. He checked it, expression grim. Sarah's in the wind. And she has your name, your face, and your location. He accelerated slightly. This isn't over. Not by a long shot. Lillian's eyes met mine in the darkness, fear and determination mingling in their depths. It will be. Soon. I wasn't sure if it was a promise or a threat. Perhaps both. The Seattle safe house overlooked Elliott Bay, a nondescript apartment in a modern high-rise. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of gray water meeting gray sky, a fitting backdrop for the moral ambiguity that had become my life. Special Agent Marcus Torres had greeted us with suspicious eyes and a firm handshake. Ryan's favor turned out to be substantial. Torres had arranged protective custody protocols without official paperwork, buying us 48 hours before Lillian would need to surrender formally. The evidence is compelling, Torres said, reviewing the files from both flash drives. His dark eyes flickered between his laptop screen and Lillian's face. Sarah Kellerman appears to be the primary actor in both homicides, but the financial crimes implicate all of you to varying degrees. I stood by the window watching ferries crawl across the bay. What about Kazarian? We've been building a case against him for years. Torres's tone was measured, professional. Ms. Carver's testimony, combined with these financial records, could finally give us what we need. Lillian sat rigidly on the couch, hands clasped in her lap. I'll tell you everything. In exchange for consideration in my sentencing. Torres nodded. That can be arranged depending on the value of your cooperation. Ryan remained near the door, a sentinel unmoved by the legal negotiations. His focus was singular, justice for Nate. The rest was just bureaucratic noise. What about Sarah? I asked. Any sign of her? Border Patrol and transportation hubs have been alerted, Torres replied. Her accounts are frozen, known associates under surveillance. It's only a matter of time. The commodity we'd all squandered in different ways. I'd spent mine buried in work, blinded by trust. Lillian had spent hers building an elaborate facade, living a double life. Nate had run out entirely. Torres's phone rang. He stepped into the adjoining room to take the call, leaving the three of us in uncomfortable silence. I need air, I said finally, heading for the small balcony. Outside, Seattle's perpetual drizzle beaded on my skin. Behind me, the glass door slid open. Lillian joined me, keeping a careful distance. I never thought it would end like this, she said quietly. Which part? The criminal enterprise or our marriage? She accepted the barb without flinching. Both. Why, Lillian? The question that had haunted me for days finally escaped. We had everything: success, respect, each other. Why risk it all? Did we have each other? Her gaze remained on the distant water. When was the last time you really saw me, Eli? Not the wife, not the business partner, but me. I started to protest, then stopped. When had I last truly seen her? Before the Miller Project consumed me? Before Carver and Holloway became the rising star of Pacific Northwest architecture? That doesn't justify what you did, I said finally. No, she agreed. Nothing does. I made choices, terrible, selfish choices. I betrayed your trust. I involved myself with criminals. I lied to everyone. She turned to face me, rain mingling with what might have been tears. But I never stopped loving you. And I never slept with Nate. The confession hung between us, neither absolution nor condemnation. Just truth, finally. Margaret knew everything, Lillian continued. She didn't just help me after Nate died, she'd been involved from the beginning. Introduced me to Kazarian, encouraged the arrangement. Why would she do that? Power. Control. Lillian's laugh was bitter. And revenge against you. Me? What did I ever do to Margaret? You took me away from the future she'd planned. The right connections, the right husband, the right image. Lillian shook her head. Margaret never forgave you for disrupting her grand design. When Kazarian offered an opportunity to regain control, to prove you weren't enough for me, she took it. The revelation of Margaret's manipulation twisted like a knife. My mother-in-law's cold demeanor had hidden depths of malice I'd never suspected. When she realized Sarah had killed Nate and was coming for me next, she finally showed something like real concern, Lillian said. Her last act was arranging my escape. Maybe the only maternal thing she ever did for me. Inside, Torres emerged from his call, gesturing urgently to Ryan. Their expressions triggered alarm bells in my mind. Something's wrong, I said, sliding open the door. Torres's face was grim. We've been compromised. Sarah Kellerman accessed FBI personnel files 4 hours ago. She knows about this location. Ryan was already moving, checking his weapon. How long do we have? Unknown. Local agents are en route, but... The building's fire alarm cut him off, shrieking through the apartment. Torres swore under his breath. Standard tactic. Create chaos, force evacuation. He grabbed his phone. We can't risk the stairwells or elevator. Service corridor, Ryan said. Every building this size has maintenance access. As we prepared to move, Lillian gripped my arm. Eli, if something happens. It won't, I interrupted with more confidence than I felt. Listen to me, she insisted. Everything you need to bring down Kazarian and Sarah is in my safety deposit box at First Union Bank. Box 412. The key is in the lining of my suitcase. Before I could respond, the power cut out, plunging the apartment into sudden darkness. Emergency lights flickered on, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. She's here, Ryan said, voice flat. And she's not coming alone. Torres moved to the door, gun drawn. Stay behind me. We moved quickly and quietly. As we entered the hallway, a single gunshot echoed from the stairwell, followed by alarmed shouts from other residents. The reckoning had begun. 6 months later, I stood alone on the shores of Lake Spanaway. Winter had given way to spring, then summer. The water lay still and innocent beneath a clear blue sky, betraying nothing of its secrets. No hint of the night that had shattered so many lives. The FBI raid on the Seattle safe house had been perfectly timed. Sarah and 3 of Kazarian's men had been apprehended in the stairwell, moments before they reached our floor. No casualties except perhaps for my lingering faith in human nature. The subsequent weeks had unfolded in a blur of depositions, grand jury hearings, and plea negotiations. Lillian had kept her word, providing testimony that helped federal prosecutors build an airtight case against Victor Kazarian and his organization. Sarah Kellerman, facing 2 murder charges and multiple federal indictments, had eventually accepted a plea deal, life imprisonment in exchange for information on Kazarian's broader criminal network. I'd watched it all with a strange detachment, as if observing someone else's tragedy. The media had feasted on the story, of course. Scandalous headlines proclaiming betrayal in high society, murder among Tacoma's elite. I'd stopped reading newspapers after the third article that described me as the oblivious husband. They weren't entirely wrong. The water lapped gently at the rocky shore. Somewhere beneath its surface, Nate had spent his final moments. My business partner. My best friend. A man I'd known for 15 years, yet never truly known at all. I thought I'd find you here. I turned to see Ryan Holloway approaching, hands in the pockets of his cargo pants. His military bearing remained, but the razor-sharp vigilance had softened somewhat. Force of habit, I replied. I come here to think. He nodded, understanding without needing explanation. The sentencing is tomorrow. I know. Will you be there? I skipped a stone across the lake surface, watching it bounce 4 times before disappearing. I haven't decided. Lillian had pleaded guilty to reduced charges of fraud and money laundering. The prosecutor had recommended leniency in light of her cooperation, perhaps as little as 5 years. A fraction of the time Sarah would serve, yet still a lifetime compared to the 7 years of our marriage. She asks about you, Ryan said, his tone carefully neutral. Every time I visit. I glanced at him, surprised. You visit Lillian? He shrugged, uncomfortable with the admission. Someone should. Her mother's dead. Her friends were never real. She has no one else. The irony wasn't lost on me, Nate's brother showing more compassion to Lillian than I had managed in 6 months. I hadn't seen her since the trial began. Couldn't bring myself to face her across the sterile visitor's room at the Federal Detention Center. She saved your life that night, Ryan continued. When Sarah came through the service corridor, Lillian was the one who spotted the laser sight on your back. I remembered the blur of motion, Lillian shoving me aside as a bullet whispered past. I'd attributed it to chaos, to luck. Not to a conscious choice. It doesn't erase what she did, I said. No, Ryan agreed. But maybe it's part of who she is. The good and the bad tangled together. Like all of us, I supposed. None entirely villain, none entirely hero. I'd sold our house, unable to live among the ghosts of our shared life. Carver and Holloway architecture had been dissolved, its assets used to compensate fraud victims. I'd started over with a small firm in Seattle, designing community centers and affordable housing rather than luxury estates. The Miller Project, once my crowning achievement, had been completed by another architect. I hadn't attended the opening. What will you do now? I asked Ryan. Back to active duty next month. Special operations. His gaze swept the peaceful lake. Some worlds make more sense than others. I understood that sentiment all too well. And you? He asked. Keep rebuilding, I guess. Day by day. From my pocket, I withdrew Lillian's wedding ring, the cracked platinum band I'd carried since that night in Portland. A talisman of sorts, a reminder of shattered vows and unexpected truths. You still have that, Ryan observed. Not for much longer. With a deliberate motion, I drew back my arm and threw the ring into the deepest part of Lake Spanaway. It arced through the sunlight, a brief flash of silver, before disappearing beneath the surface without so much as a ripple. Letting go at last. I've been thinking about Nate a lot lately, I said. The good times before all this. Remembering the friend, not the betrayer. Ryan nodded. That's how healing works, I think. Not forgetting the wounds but not letting them define everything either. As the sun began its descent toward the Olympic Mountains, we stood in companionable silence. 2 men connected by loss, by a story neither of us had chosen. Tomorrow I would attend Lillian's sentencing. Not for closure, that was a myth sold by self-help books, but for acknowledgement. Of what had been lost and what might still remain. The lake kept its secrets but I had released mine. Perhaps that was enough. The stillness after the storm wasn't peace exactly. But it was a beginning.